kill this debate, or is there something at stake?
Well, I think there's no expectation for Trump to show up at any of these debates. I think what his campaign is looking at are the numbers that have come out in recent days and weeks that show him far above the rest of the field. So I don't think that the expectations are going to be much different than they have been in the first two debates. A lot of it is going to depend on what the message is of the candidates that are on the stage. Are they going to make it about?
But is he killed it? Has he killed it, or can somebody actually accomplish something even in his absence?
I think there is very little chance that somebody is going to actually accomplish something meaningful that is going to make a meaningful move in the race in general.
Sean?
So I think that let's go dial this back. Have the debates mattered? And I don't really think they have. The question is right now, I think donors, especially, look, without jumping into last night's election, I think the Youngkin, the savior narrative is dead after last night. Therefore, the question is big donors who I think eventually will get to Donald Trump the way they did in 2015 and stayed with him in 2020 are still trying to figure out who's that potential alternative. They still think that there's a shot at coalescing around another candidate. Right now, I think my guess is the conventional wisdom is they think Nikki Haley tonight, if she can really show that she's feisty and commanding of the issues on foreign policy, et cetera, that they want to see if she can be given the shot and they can maybe put a pile of money in her corner in her super PAC or something. That's the only thing that's consequential. Will it ultimately matter? No. I think Donald Trump is still by far the candidate that's going to be the nominee. I think that the problem is that there is still a swath, 15, 20% of the donor class that wants an alternative to Trump. I think the media wants an alternative to Trump. The media wants a race more than anything else. They don't want a boring December and January. And so tonight, my view is that this is going to be Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis going at it. Do they turn people off with a nastiness, or does Nikki Haley show that she rises above it? I don't think that. So I'll just end it by this. I think that DeSantis would have to really do something miraculous to show that he can be put back in that alternative to Donald Trump category. This tonight is all about Nikki Haley.
So just to stay with DeSantis for a second, what does that look like? Say you're cheering for Ron DeSantis and you're advising him. What could he do within the confines of the debate that would be miraculous?
I think he's, it's not something you can plan for. I think he's got to find one of those moments. When Nikki Haley said to Vivek Ramaswamy the last time, every time you talk, it makes me dumber. That wasn't a scripted moment. It looked genuine. It looked authentic, and it won the moment. And it actually, I think, butted any trajectory that Ramaswamy had. It's not a planned moment. It's got to be something that DeSantis says, when I took on Disney and da-da-da-da. I mean, it's got to look like he's got to fight. He's got to have a plan. It's got to counter the narrative that everything is that he has kind of put forward.
Gail, are you the least bit interested in anybody on the stage except for Nikki Haley?
So I think that Nikki Haley had the lowest expectations probably at the very beginning of this. Nobody thought that she was going to rise to the level that she has. All the expectations were on DeSantis. And so he had a lot to lose in those first two debates. I agree with Sean that DeSantis and Haley will probably dominate tonight. I think the moderators will probably do their best to make it about those two. I don't think that, a lot of the other maybe they'll focus on those two and, the differences between each other and also Trump. I think while Trump's not going to be there, his presence is still going to be felt and loom large on the debate. But what I think is most interesting, just as somebody who's been in this business a long time, is that when I work with candidates, I say, and we all do this, always be on offense. And there have been so many times in these debates where these candidates have been on defense when there's really no reason to be on defense, especially Ron DeSantis. DeSantis is really the only one on that stage that can say, on issues that Republican voters care about, that are going to be tuning in tonight, that are looking for an alternative, he's really the only one on that stage that's able to say, I did things differently than Trump and I did them better. And he can point to the lockdowns in Florida, or the COVID response in Florida, the way that he handled the pandemic. Trump will not acknowledge this. So he's really the only one on that stage that can say, I did it different, I did it better. And so he should be on that offense.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting to me is that what Trump has always had going for him is the ability to say, I was president. I did do these things. I accomplished this stuff. I mean, everything from moving the embassy to Jerusalem and talking about what's doing in Israel, all that stuff domestically. Here's what I did. Unemployment was low for blacks and for women and for other, I mean, blah, 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 blah. He doesn't have to say I would, right? He can say I did it. What DeSantis has is being a governor for the last 5+ years that he can say, I did it. He has the same kind of ability, as Gail's pointing out, to talk about accomplishments that no one else has. Nikki Haley was a governor, but she was a governor before all of this really came into vogue in terms of fighting for certain things the MAGA sort of folks want to see. That's what he should play to his strengths on. But I just want to touch on one other thing, Mark. You brought this up yesterday when we were kind of previewing this thing. I think that by having 2 less candidates, it's going to change the dynamic a little in terms of the time that's allocated to each to maybe make an argument or rebut one that's not as clickbaity, if you will.
I read that they changed the rule for this one, that you don't get to automatically respond if your name's invoked, which will create less chaos, since obviously that was a recipe for endless back and forth. But just talk about Haley for a second. Here's my confusion. She's taken some shots at Donald Trump in the first 2 debates. She seems to have appealed to some reporters and some donors.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the formula in talking about Donald Trump for her tonight to expand her actual support amongst voters? Is it to say, I'm just like Trump, but better? Is it to criticize him? What's the formula to actually rise in the polls?
Well, that's a theory. She's testing out a theory. So I think there's 2 ways to look at this. The way that Nikki Haley has approached it, her theory is, I'm going to take the bark off of him. I'm going to get on that stage and I'm going to attack him. And she really has been the most aggressive against him as like a top tier candidate. At the beginning, everybody was kind of walking the line and saying, I like Trump, but I just don't think he's electable. I like his politics, but he can't beat Biden. And we've already seen that before. That was a really safe place. Nikki Haley moved out of that safe zone and she started to attack him, especially in the first debate.
She's at 8%.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, but the idea that you have to narrow the field and winnow the field so that it's just one-on-one, a Trump alternative versus Trump, and then you're able to go after him. Maybe that makes more of a difference than if you're on a stage with 4 other people and you're trying to say, hey guys, I like Trump, I'm just going to do it differently or do it better. That's the theory that we're seeing Nikki Haley test. And I don't know that she's going to deviate from that because she's already done it the first 2 times. But what I can tell you is this: voters in these early states are open to an alternative. But what they want to see from these candidates is somebody who is going to be as tough as Trump, that will take the fight to the people that they don't like and win, that they will be standing up for the rights that these voters believe are so fundamental, but just different. So what these voters are saying is, I'm open to an alternative. Show me that you can be as tough as Donald Trump, that you can take the fight to them. And I want to like you better, because these voters like Trump's policies. They like Trump's policies. They just don't like him. That's why they're open to the alternative.
The X factor, there's 2 X factors that I want to throw out there. One, we can talk about this to the extent in a minute, but I think how the moderators frame the questions to these guys is going to be interesting. Because it's a different dynamic than in the past. You've got Hugh Hewitt, who is going to be a much more conservative. I wouldn't be surprised if he really frames foreign policy questions, which is in his wheelhouse, to them. But secondly, if you think back, Chris Christie, the way he, quote, took out Marco Rubio that cycle, or the 2015 cycle, the X factor in my mind are, what do the other candidates do to throw the dynamic off the goals that we're talking about each one of these trying to achieve? So in other words, does Chris Christie say, you know what, Nikki, or you know what, Ron, that's ridiculous, you stood by and did this, and really try to take them down a notch? Chris Christie has to do something. These other candidates that are on the stage, and I don't think Tim Scott, that's really not his shtick. He's a nice guy. He's not going to come in kamikaze style. But Chris Christie needs to do something because they're not just standing there being wallflowers on a stage. So what does he do to give him some sort of momentum, and who's the target of that? Because I think that much as I said with Ramaswamy being the ire of Haley, does Christie kind of go after one of them and say, my best shot is to take DeSantis down a notch and to show that, I was a governor that did this, this, and this, and you talk a good game. And that's where suddenly you're fighting a two-front war.
Well, and it's potentially the last debate for Christie and Scott, unless they bump up, right? They're both short of where the standard is likely to be for the next debate. We haven't talked about Ramaswamy. Dominated the first debate to a large extent, receded a little bit. Is he, do you think, just playing out the string, or do you think he also is going to be looking to have more of a breakthrough performance?
Well, I think as a professional debater, and he describes himself that way, he's probably going to do what he's done in these last two debates, and that's really make big bold statements and hope people like them. I think the first debate he dominated, and then it was the reaction to his performance. And when Nikki Haley had that moment, the first moment against Vivek, I think that's when we first started to see that people were, interested in what he had to say. He was the new guy, but then didn't love how he treated the other candidates, maybe. And then we saw him sort of reverse course in the second debate and say, everybody up here, everybody on this stage is good people, but they're broken by the system, when the message from the first debate was opposite.
Hey, so real quick, for those people that are watching via the live stream on the Zoom, if you go to your comment box, you can ask a question. We're also monitoring the comments on YouTube. And so I've got several of those tonight that I can bring up in a second when you're ready. We're almost at the halfway mark. But the first thing I want to bring up, because it's an obsession of mine, is I do think that, Mark, you brought this up before. This is the first non-Fox debate. This is NBC. I think watching the Today Show this morning and seeing what they were talking about, they said the abortion issue is definitely going to be an issue tonight. And I mean, that was predictable regardless of last night's outcome. But I think that this is going to be, I will be very shocked if you don't see Lester Holt and Kristen Welker in particular really focus on abortion tonight. Something that I think there's a question, and I've been very upfront. I tweeted this morning. I think Republicans, everyone on that stage is pro-life. The question for Republicans and non-conservatives is, how do we message this? And that's, I think, a valid line of discussion. Whether or not pro-life is an issue or not is a non-starter in the Republican Party. We are settled. We are a pro-life party. How NBC moderators handle this tonight, I think, is going to be really interesting to see. Is there backlash against the process? And then that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, look, 2 hours with 5 candidates is a lot of time for moderator questions. And I agree with you that Hugh will probably be heavy on foreign policy. The election results open the door to asking about abortion, even though it's kind of been asked and answered, right? It was already addressed in the earlier debate. And Nikki Haley was judged by the consultant class as having had the best answer, a pro-life answer, but a pro-life answer that in theory could finesse suburban voters. I'll be curious to see. I'm pretty sure we know what she's going to say. She's already given a major speech on this. She does have what most consultants think is the best answer of anyone in the party right now. But I'll be curious to see what the other 4 do. There's a bigger burden on them. And after the results from last night, I do think it's not a case of liberal bias to ask this topic. Because right now, if you're looking,
but how you ask it matters, Mark. This 100%,
is the percent. But
yeah, I mean that's my point. I think it's fair to ask the question, but how you ask it. I think how would you ask it?
Help them out.
The liberals want to say that this is a loser of an issue and Republicans should give this up. I think there's a difference between, and that's not going to happen. Republicans are a pro-life party. I think saying how can we message this differently and more effectively is a fair question, because clearly the results last night showed that the way that a lot of people, especially as my point has been in Virginia, they screwed this up. They didn't go on offense. They didn't allow Democrats to have to answer for their extreme positions. I think how Republicans handle this is important, but how it's asked the tone and tenor and everything, which is where I think the default of NBC is to go to, this is a horrible issue and you guys are on the wrong side of it, is very different than asking, how can you message more effectively?
Yeah. Look, electability, the electability argument, which is, of course, for a lot of people in the party, what this is about, is now in peril for them because Trump's ahead, right? We see poll after poll, Trump beating Biden. So it's going to be hard for them to say, you got to vote for me because I'm better on explaining abortion when Trump's already ahead. And Trump, of course, is the most flexible of more flexible than anybody on that stage in talking about abortion, which he's already demonstrated.
So can I just throw, Vincent was asking, will Trump's rally tonight affect the debate in any way? Gail, what do you think about how his counter programming has gone?
Well, he's had counter programming before. And I think that the people that are, I don't know that it's going to impact it any more than it did the first time, which is to say that, people that like Trump, that want to hear from Trump are going to tune into his show. And then people that want to hear from the alternative or just, are hoping for good TV will turn into the debate. But I do want to say something quickly on abortion. And that's that our party needs to figure out how to deal with it, because it's not just a lesson from last night. It is a lesson from 2 years ago or last year, 1 year ago, where we saw voters go to the polls. And after I see Governor Walker is joining us now.
I think we're getting the technology.
Okay, I'll just finish this really quickly. Democrats spent $500 million on this issue, and that's how they won. They messaged it correctly. They were on. We did not. And so that's a lesson that we have to learn for going into next year.
Gail, if you're in charge of the party's message on abortion, what is it?
I'm sorry?
If you're put in charge of the party's message on abortion, what would it be?
On the message of abortion? I think
what should Republicans say? Well, what should the message be?
We have to fight. So what they're fighting us on, what they're saying is that Republicans are too extreme. Do you know, Mark, when I mentioned that Democrats spent $500 million on it, they did. They spent $500 million. And you know how much we spent on it? There was a heritage number that came out, and it was like $10 to $15 million. And this was in 2022. So they messaged it, and they said that we were extreme. They convinced voters that Republicans are extreme. Republicans did not fight back, and we're still not fighting back on the extremist issue. We have to at least fight it to a draw.
So can I just say this? I think, Mark, to get to your question, Gail's right. We need to fight back. I wrote an op-ed. I put it at the top of my Twitter page today, if anyone wants to read this, which is in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the former governor, Ralph Northam, a doctor, said on WTOP, on audio that is available to everyone, we wait for the baby to come out, we make it comfortable, and then we make a decision with the parents. Every Democrat in Virginia has to answer for whether or not they agree with Governor Ralph Northam's position on abortion. That is extreme. That is called murder. That the bottom line is Republicans did nothing but, and no pun intended, put themselves in the fetal position on this issue. Gail's right. We need to be on offense, asking them to answer that question. Senator Tran from Virginia put a bill in. They have an extreme position, and instead of making them and their candidates answer for their extreme position, Republicans in Virginia said, why don't we settle on a 15-week ban, and then we'll say that we're not as extreme as they claim they are, and we'll move on. It didn't work. It didn't happen. Every ad in Virginia was MAGA extremists, fill in the name, is nuts and trying to take away your right. We did nothing to prosecute the case against them, and that was the problem. That's the message right there. It's not try to figure out what's the least worst harmful argument against us and play defense. It's playing offense and saying they're the ones with the extreme position.
It's about showing up to the fight. I mean, you can't say that you lost the fight when you didn't show up for it.
Yeah.
So it's about showing up and pushing back on these extremist arguments, because like Sean's whole point is exactly right. Also after 2022, there's more lessons to be learned going forward, including for tonight's debate. Republicans are trusted more on the economy, on crime, on immigration, on almost every other issue. But then when you look at the issue of abortion, independents and Democrats by far trust the Democrats. And so these are the people that make the difference in these tight races, in these swing states, and especially in the midterms where you want suburban women to turn out, except that the Democrats have spent $500 million in these big races to say that Republicans are too extreme and too scary, and the way that they say it has worked. So we have to show up to the fight. And so I hope that candidates tonight will heed that lesson.
So Governor Walker, we've been experiencing some technical issues, but I believe you're here. If you can hear or see us, I can see you.
Yep, I can absolutely hear from you. I don't know why the technical problems are happening, but once worked at IBM, but I sold warranty agreements. I didn't actually deal with the technology, so sorry about that.
You have to turn your camera on.
Governor, it's good to be with you again. Let me ask you this. There's a question that came in from Heart of Nixie that says, are we seeing a debate for VP? I've got my answer on this, but let's start with you. What do you think?
No, I think the folks here are absolutely serious about being president. I think the bigger challenge, I've said this before, is these debates are not for who's going to be the vice president, but who's going to be number two. Number two doesn't matter. Close only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and slow dancing, not in politics. And so one of these folks has to wake up and make a bigger difference than they've made up until now, or it's just going to be whoever wins the championship for number two.
Governor, let me ask you about Hugh Hewitt, because you've been interviewed by him and been on debate stage, I think, with him. How tricky is he to prepare for? Because he sometimes asks, I wouldn't say gotcha questions, but serious substantive questions that aren't expected.
Well, I think it's going to be great. He was actually one of the panelists at the second debate that CNN did at the Reagan Library 8 years ago. And I'm looking forward to him being a panelist, because I think he'll ask, as you say, will ask substantive questions, but they won't be softballs. They will be particularly on national security. I think the candidates better be prepared for that. And my guess is that some people call her ambassador. I still call her Governor Nikki Haley, will probably perform the best of the bunch. And, as usual, Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, who's good on domestic issues, maybe come off the rails again, as he did in that first debate.
Hey,
Governor, you think?
Can I jump in real quick? Gail, I'm sorry. Before Governor, we've talked about this on one of the previous calls, but YAF, the organization that you had, Young Americans Foundation, was part of that debate. And we talked about this, but I don't want to get into it. But this time, the Republican Jewish Coalition is a partner of the debate. What advice would you give them, as far as, obviously their issues are front and center in the debate, about trying to inject an issue or something into how best for them to make sure that something that matters to their voters gets brought across?
Well, I hope by the mere fact that they've been picked, that sends a message to NBC, because we've talked about before, just because you're a partner with the RNC for the debate doesn't mean that the moderators are under any obligation to ask any question. I think they will anyway, regardless of RJC's involvement. They're going to ask about Israel. They're going to ask about Hamas. They're going to ask about Palestine and the Middle East. And they should. I mean, we had an absolute massacre just over a month ago. I think Americans want to know about that. I also think, beyond just asking about what should happen in that region, I hope that a follow-up or an additional question on that is something we've seen, again, at Young Americans Foundation. We've been warning about this for years as well. America overall is with Israel. Those under the age of 30 are almost the flip of that. There is radical views amongst young people, particularly on college campuses, fueled by some of these professors, one of whom at Columbia actually said he found it exhilarating. These are the sorts of comments that sadly are mainstream on college campuses. And I would hope that they ask about that. If NBC doesn't, I think it's Hugh Hewitt's responsibility to bring that up as well.
You guys think that the candidates would be smart to blame Donald Trump for the election results last night? Think that's something voters would want to hear?
Look, here's my 2 cents on this. The bottom line is 50+%. I mean, Trump's winning in every one of these states. To antagonize his voters more, and that's right now how that's going to be seen. I mean, my personal strategy, if I were advising a non-candidate, would be make yourself the alternative first. Don't try to, because what's happening, I mean, look at the Chris Christie strategy. I mean, he has gone kamikaze at Trump, and it's perceived as an attack on his voters. And I just don't see that as being effective. I think you've got time between now and Iowa to sort of make yourself the alternative to Trump and then prosecute that case. But right now, until you can be seen as the rightful alternative to Trump, trying to take him down is only going to probably put you back into the single digits.
Sean, I agree with that too. The other thing to remember is, even though the results were obviously staring in their face from last night, you've got the poll from earlier this week, and I think the biggest argument any of these people on the debate stage tonight might have had in the past was that they were more electable,
Right.
and some of them are more electable. But those polls show in 5 of those 6 states, Donald Trump today beats Joe Biden. So if you're someone who likes the known commodity of President Trump, the only real reason you'd give that up is if you thought he couldn't win, and the polls just showed you can.
Right.
Anybody think Trump? I don't think there's any of us think he's going to be in any of the debates. Anybody think he'll pay a price in Iowa and New Hampshire after this debate? If we move there, if there are debates in those states, they pay a price for not participating.
I don't think he's going to pay a price. His floor is still going to be what his floor is. I think that the onus and the risk is on the alternatives, that the people that are the guys that are running against him and Nikki Haley running against him, they're the ones that have the burden to show that they can be the alternative. And I don't think that last night's results are really going to matter in anything other than maybe the short term. So possibly because voters, it seems kind of small, and voters want to know what the election is going to look like in a year from now instead of what it looked like last night. So they want to know, not can we win the election that already happened, but can we win the next one? So that's why I hope that these Republican candidates are going to train their fire on Biden, because after the first debate, I think Biden was mentioned one time. By several of the candidates didn't mention him at all. I think Mike Pence and Nikki Haley were the only ones that really even mentioned him by name. Everybody else went after Trump or went after each other. It was kind of a cage match.
Yep. This comes down to, can you prosecute the case against Biden? At the end of the day, you're right. It is about electability. And so if you're sitting there going after Donald Trump, you're just upsetting a good chunk of the base. If you're focusing your attacks on Joe Biden and why you will beat him or Kamala Harris or whomever else, then you're much better suited. I think right now voters want to know, oh, I see it. That person can win against Joe Biden. They can win against Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or whoever ends up being the Dem nominee. But the bottom line is, going after Trump isn't a long-term winning strategy. And to answer your question, Mark, look, it's not hurting him now. If you play out Iowa, DeSantis has to do well in Iowa. He's staked his whole ground in there. Kim Reynolds, the current governor, endorsed him. But right now, the factor to me that's going to be critical tonight is if Nikki Haley comes out and goes on the ascent, right? This dynamic is going to be really weird, because the current governor's with DeSantis. If he doesn't go up and she does, she being Haley, that really, to Gail's point, really locks in that floor for Donald Trump, and he walks away with Iowa, it's over.
Yeah.
Can't disagree with that. Last moment, everybody name an issue that's not an obvious one you think is going to be asked about tonight.
But, hey, Ron, Mark, can I just say that, because it was actually funny you brought that up. Rich actually asked, what will be the next best question outside of abortion, which I think.
All right, everybody give one topic that you predict will be asked about that's not obvious. You can't say Israel, etc.
Okay. We know that Hugh Hewitt is going to ask about the nuclear triad. So if campaign said prep for that, then you need to prep for it. There's still time.
Governor, what's a topic you predict will come up?
TikTok. Should we ban TikTok or not? Oddly enough, I think it'll actually come up.
Oh, that's a good one. I hope you're right on that one. Look, I think it sounds trite, but I think immigration, because it plays into our national security in a way that it hasn't before with this whole with what's going on with Hamas and Israel. So how that gets asked and answered is going to be extremely important.
Okay, I predict they'll be asked about who their running mates would be. That's my prediction.
That's interesting.
All right, we're going to be back in 24 hours or 23 and a half hours to talk about what happened to end the debate. You'll be able to watch a replay of this. If you missed part of it, we'll send that around and be posted on all our channels. And thanks to Gail and the governor for joining us. And we look forward to seeing a lot of you back here again tomorrow, 23 and a half hours from now. Enjoy the debate, and we'll see you in the morning.
See you guys.